Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
All right, take two. Sam George, welcome to Unleash Your Story. I was just having you chat here. We hadn't pressed the go button, but I'm so grateful to have you here today talking about your latest book. I'll get back to you. The discommunication crisis, and it is a super crisis. A good portion of our audience are business owners, but it's not just affecting business owners, it's affecting everyone. And you wrote this wonderful book. Share, what prompted you to write your book?
Well, I was interested. I was working on basically a broader book about the nature of fear, and I believe, and I still believe, and I found out the reason why I'm writing this book, that our conceptions of fear, that it's this ancient fight or flight stuff, all that, the monkey mind, that's not true. That's not what fear is about, and this came up as something. An issue that I had been dealt with for a long time, and it was crazy. People didn't return my messages, and then shortly within 24 hours, I was sure that something was wrong, that it had to be wrong with me. I jumped to the worst case scenario, like the worst possible thing that they might not return the message for. I catastrophize about it, and then it formed a loop. I couldn't get it out of my head, and this has been happening to me for years. So I did talk to a therapist about it, and the therapist says, "This is a common experience." I said, "What is it?" "I don't know. You're the first person who's ever said it. It's a common experience, but you're the first person who's ever brought it to my attention."
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is probably the first time a lot of you have ever heard anybody openly discuss about this component that we all do. And it's quite interesting. We all do it. And so, this it's crazy. And so, you can't you're not okay if someone has not returned your call. You have anxiety and agitation. Very quickly, you assume that something's wrong, and that that somehow you're the center of the story, and you create a worst case scenario to explain.
Yeah. Well, Sam, it's funny because I think about it like this. If we're having a conversation like this, I would never just get up, go to the bathroom, and come back and not even say something while you're in mid-sentence. That would be so rude. But when we do emails, it's kind of like that. You're sending an email and then coming back later to see if they got back to you. We're constantly disconnecting from each other and then sending another message. And again, like your mind just makes up, fill in the loops and come up with crazy stories.
Well, your mind's thinking about crazy stories. Okay, so here's the thing. What's at the heart of this? And it existed prior to it, but you see, we never had. Yeah, sure, there were unreturned calls, but these are conversations. Okay, these are conversations, and unreturned calls and an invitation to a conversation. Right? This is a conversation. Since the beginning of time, human beings have spoke with direct feedback. That is, in face-to-face, real-time, back and forth. And then in the last, by phones, then eventually. So by face or by phone, this is how it's always been immediate contact for conversations. I mean, there are symbolic communications, there are smoke signals and Morse code and stuff, but that's not a comment for conversational purposes, right? Mm-hmm. So this is truly historic. In many ways, the switch from a system. Okay, so with emails and text, what's different is that with phone and in-person direct communication, actually the definition of communication implies immediate feedback. Because how would we even begin to have this conversation? How would you do this show through text or through emails? It'd be impossible, it'd be absurd, okay? And so we it's patently obvious that this is not the same thing. But but emails and text have become the predominant form of business communication and communication, period. And we rely heavily on it. And so much that what happens is that the other parts are being excluded. Less and less conference calls, less and less meetings, less and less face-to-face contact, and so the consequences are very real.
Let's talk about that. Share what you found through your research, the consequences, some of the consequences that have come about through mostly communicating through text and DM. Because a lot of my friends say, "Hey, just DM me. It's quicker. It's easier."
Well, it has created a culture of anxiety. I mean, you don't know where you stand. In other words, this conversation, I compare an email. Okay, a conversation like this conversation. Okay, here's what happens. You and I will be able to present information to each other. There will be feedback at the end of this conversation. There will be total knowledge. Anything that needs to be clarified, everything is there. You don't walk away, and you feel good about that. You always talk about a good conversation. Very rarely do you have a bad conversation. So why are good conversations good? Well, they validate you. You feel fully like someone's fully listening to you. That feels good. No, it's the emails and texts. It's a joke. I mean, like that. There's no way on a scale of percentage of say 100%. Like high, the goal of communication is understanding, and if you compare this, okay, let's say we reach a level of 87% understanding here. Well, with email, you're lucky to get to 12. I mean, like if the standard is to deal with the full complexity of what we're talking about, and so it's patently obvious. Emails and texts started out something on the side with your friends. It was a recreational thing, but now they're the backbone of business, and it's killing business. It's killing relationships. You have to begin with the premise that email interferes with communication as much as it facilitates it. Now, it facilitates communication in other ways. Nothing is yin and yang, but we have to acknowledge that a system in which you do not have immediate feedback, where no one is really sure where they stand, where people are waiting and having psychological, all kinds of anxieties and phantasms, that the system is broken. And so in my book, I show at a personal level how in both a worker or a teacher or a mother or in relationships, how you can develop a system in which you can get your conversation, have your emails read, fully understood, and promptly responded. And that promptly responded is important, because then you start taking a step closer. So there's two things. After you read my book, you'll have the tools to get as close as possible to achieving the level of clarity of direct communication. But there's no way that you can emulate the depth, obviously.
Yeah.
Well,
go.
Go. No. So that's the first thing. And in terms of business, there are a number of books out here. Another book came out recently, a big book, Roll Without Email by Cal Newport came out. Another book, and he's something of an expert in this thing. It's a disaster for business, and there's a lot of data that shows that. I mean, if you think about it, if you're using something that scores about 8% to 82%, that's running your business. 8% effective communication form is running your business.
Well, tell me if you've seen this, Sam, through your personal experiences. I find that some of my best clients came from when I built that relationship, and by build it, I don't mean we did emails. I mean, we had phone calls, we met in person, if possible, not in all cases, but it was this real connection, whether in some cases, if they're far away, it's a Zoom meeting maybe, or several phone calls, but it's definitely not just email. How do you think people can start to facilitate? I mean, first get the book, but before that, what is like some of the ways that people hold on?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to get the book, and the second thing is to pick up your phone and use it. Okay, that's the second one. Okay, I mean, that's just well, I can show you how to get your emails and stuff returned and a better communication, but you have to understand that still we're dealing with something that is structurally incapable of emulating a conversation in real time.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you can't, it's like apples, and it's unfair. It's not even a contest. You know what I'm saying? So we somehow have got to believe that this is the same thing, and it's not. It's a problem. Email is a problem to communication. It interferes with communication because there's no direct feedback loop. And so that essentially we have to start out with the premise that we have to understand that, well, email may help a business by facilitating communication. It also creates, it also interferes with the communication of the business and the quality of the business. And there's no evidence, for example. I mean, I don't know where anybody, that somehow email has caused businesses to make more money or be more efficient or more effective. And all the evidence is against that. It's kind of hard. I mean, how do we do that? We can't match terms, but it's all I can say is that we all know it just starts out very simple. If you believe that a conversation is a much higher quality of interaction, okay, and that you have a much higher level of understanding and comprehension, then ask yourself why you're running your business with something like that. That's a shell of that form.
You know what
There's
I'm
no
thinking,
reason
Sam? Tell me if you've seen this. Do you think it's hiding? I'm thinking maybe some people have liked so much email because they can kind of feel safer if they just send an email than really connecting with someone. Maybe it makes you feel safer or not putting yourself out there as much. What do you think?
I think all of that's true. I do. But I think the thing is, it's a process now. It really has become a part of the process. I think we're so imbued in it that we don't even see it. And as a matter of fact, if I hadn't read, this was not I was writing about the psychological reasons of why we had these problems over these unreturned messages. And I stumbled into what's happened as a great revolution in communication, is that it's bigger than the printing press. For the first time, human beings, the dominant form of communication, doesn't have a feedback loop. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
Talking to yourself.
yeah. So of course, this is a disaster, and so I think that we have to understand that there's two steps. We have to improve email, but we have to put it in perspective. We have to understand that direct forms of communication are still very important, such as face-to-face meetings and telephone calls, that they're not stepchilds. Now we're doing everything we can to have less meetings, so have less call. And part of it's because of, they don't, but the main thing is it's just that we just got used to the system.
Yes.
So the most important thing to do is to start trying to put in your mind, to put this in perspective, to try and there are a number of ways to do that. You can solve that. But in terms of, okay, on your email, here I have a whole complete plan. Now I do digital. I have a digital marketing firm. I know all the secrets of that trade, $1 trillion, that we basically try and get you to open emails and get money from you. We're experts at this. Okay, this is what we do for a living, and we're quite good at it. So I took the secrets of some of the technology, the techniques from that, and then translated it to everyday life. And some of it's just common sense. So I'll give you some just 5 tips, okay, out of dozens. You have to really look at the integrated strategy. Well, the first thing is you have to get them to, in designing your email. How many times have you struggled to try and figure out what the person is saying in the email? Like, what's the point, or what are you getting at, or what do you want from me, or what's the response? I mean, this is a big problem. So there's a simple way of doing that. You make your email short, and whatever your email is about, you will reformulate it and always ask a question. Always ask a question. Immediately, they can gravitate to the question There's no time to, you know, I mean, that brings the person in. And of course, a question deserves a response. You know, the second thing is, so make it tight. Always ask a question. The second thing is, and you've got to get them to open it. In other words, this is where, and this is a secret. I mean, all that digital marketing talks about is subject lines. There's millions of books, you know, I mean, does studies at best subject lines and stuff. You know, like you can get a high open because if they don't open your email, they're not going to read your email. It's pretty simple. So they have no other information other than the subject line to guide them.
Yeah.
You know, they don't know what's inside the email. So things like, "Uh-oh, your prescription is overdue," or you know, things like that, or even simpler things like, "Thank you." I mean, there's a whole like science of stuff that occurs. But the idea here is you want to invoke curiosity. You want to take this person to say, "Huh, I'm curious. I'm going to open this email." Okay. So with your friends, it's the same thing. You know, the worst thing you can do in most cases is to put the subject of the email in the email. That's the worst thing you can do. It's so predictable. What will happen is the person, when they see it, will not read it right away. They'll log it. And that's when many emails get lost, is that you'll just forget. That's the number one reason emails is not returned, is that people log them. They intend to get back. And sometimes you do remember like 2 days later, but the person on the other side is still catastrophizing. You know, I mean, they haven't waited to go off into their, you know, so, but then the next step, so you have to, anything. I mean, like, if you don't want to give it a lot of time, think of the first word that comes to your mind. Blue, put blue. Whatever, clouds. It's just whatever, you know. I'm just giving you a simple
to
thing.
get them to go like,
what?
What?
Whatever the word you come, just whatever the first word comes in your mind, just put that one word in there, put nothing else, and they'll open it. Okay.
They're
I
like,
mean,
I
that's
didn't
it.
know what this has to do with this, but okay. Yeah.
Well, now
That's
because
number-
they'll see, they know you. I mean, we're talking about where the pre-existing relationships, right?
Yeah.
Even if they don't, you know, they're going to open it. You know, they're going to. You're curious. If I see, meeting, I know about the meeting. It's over there, right?
Yeah.
So the last thing, ironically, the worst thing you can do is put what's the email is about in the subject line. You know, obviously there's some cases where you have to do it, and, you know, but generally speaking, it's the worst thing you can do. And the best thing you do, and the more creative you are, the better. But honestly, you need a pattern interrupt. So any kind of word you can think of in your head, you could be about glue or whatever, fireworks. I mean, just anything in that will get them to open the email. And the next step is, well, how will they read them? And here we come. This is right out of Dale Carnegie's been long since the beginning of, you know, use their first name a lot. You know, many times in text and emails, they don't even say "Dear Sam," you know, it's just kind of presumed. Okay, so you start with "Dear Sam," and then you mention Sam at least a couple other times. Once in the body, maybe once at the end. You mentioned the person's name at least 3 times. Okay, and remember, it's a short email. That will make them read your email. They will keep them glued to the email. And then once you do that, they'll have read, and then they'll promptly respond. Okay, if they've read, they understood, boom, they'll respond. So the last step is, if they haven't responded, for God's sakes, within 24 hours, follow up. So many people are afraid that, you know, that it's awkward to follow up, and here they are banging their heads and over psychological. Yeah, I mean, like you're all upset about an email that hasn't been returned. Well, just send them another email. Okay. But when you do so, I will tell you, though, I've done polling on this. 75% welcome the reminder. The other 25% don't really care either way. You know, nobody in the poll said, "Oh, we get really mad," but we'll make them mad if you say, "Did you get my email?" Or you forward the email to them and you put them on the spot. You know, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to make them defensive. Your follow-up is very simple. You just send the exact same email and put a new subject line as if you hadn't even sent. Don't reference back the previous email. It doesn't need to be done. Very simple. Edit, copy, paste, boom, new subject line. New word that comes to your mind. Space.
Dog.
and so those 5 things alone will, it'll be a sea change in terms of your communication with other people. But those little things are very important, because what they have to do with is what the problems are, today, that people are so busy and they're so inundated that they have to scan their emails, that they miss emails, that they log emails. This is what's going on. Only 10% of these unreturned messages are kind of deliberate, intentional type thing, because they just don't want to deal with it. But 90% of them are, they lost the email or forgot it. So reminding them again within 24 hours. If the book also has some things for if you have like if there are things you can do. So for example, if you're waiting for a message or if you're upset or something like that, there's a section about breathing techniques and relaxation responses. With breathing techniques, it's like yoga, but it's shorter. 3 or 4 minutes of 2 minutes of like these are like officially boom, will knock you out of that anxiety, and then you can kind of distract yourself and go on with your life. So those are the things. I mean, but the bottom line here is that we have to understand that the book will help you with emails and text, but nothing can change the fact that these forms of communication are fractional. To the level of understanding, right? Understanding is the goal of communication. Direct feedback is essential to that. I mean, and by the fact that you cannot emulate that through a text or email, you can't emulate a conversation. That shows you that how I mean, again, we're dealing with something that has a understandability score of 8% against something that has we're throwing out the window is something that has an understanding rate of 82%.
This has been so informative. I don't want us to leave though without you letting everyone know where they can get their very own copy of Discommunication. I'll get back to you. Discommunication. How do they do that?
Just go to my website. It's www.discommunication, DYS, like dysfunctional, www.dyscommunication.com.
That's right. I have it right here in the bottom of the email. If you're not watching but listening in, dyscommunication.com. Get your copy today. It'll help you do those great emails so you get a response back, not only in your business, but with your friends. Don't have any of those miscommunications with your boyfriend, your mother, none of that, all of that going away. I just have to thank you again, Sam George, for coming to Unleash Your Story.
Okay, bye.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.